boneless sirloin steaks. Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. It's snowing. The snow on everything is just beautiful. Makes everything look nice and clean. The chickens may not agree. Hillary opened their pop door this morning and nobody came out. I think the hens would rather gossip with each other in here. They seem kind of quiet though. No heifers outside. Oh, there's a few cows over there. Even snow on the fence wires. Uh-oh. They've seen me. What do you guys want? Oh, now you're quiet. Given the weather today, there won't be any work on the new shop pad and clearing trees and all that, or no field work. I'm just going to be taking care of animals today and maybe talking a little bit about why we care for animals the way we do in the wintertime in this climate. Howdy, ladies. You gals are going to have to go outside for a while. Come on. Let's go. How'd you go? I have lots of cheerleaders when I work in here. Thanks for the encouragement, guys. I'm going to clean out the heifer's bedding pack. Steaming goodness. All right, ladies. You're free to explore the area. Bedding or food, it's dual purpose. Why do we keep cattle in winter the way that we do? Well, you have to have some history first. There's always been a basic distinction in cattle raising between beef and dairy, with different methods for each and long-standing traditions here in the Northeast. When it comes to dairy cattle, you want to keep them cleaner because you're milking them a couple times a day. So they typically had different conditions, and when I was a kid, it was a tie stall barn system. And what I mean by tie stall is each cow had in the barn a place that they would walk into with what was called a stanchion, which is a simple head gate. The cow knew, just through habit, walk into the head gate stanchion, and the farmer would lock the stanchion, feed the cow hay or grain through the stanchion while they milked them right behind the cow, right in the barn there. And behind where the cow stood, there was usually a gutter for the cow to poop in and pee in, and you'd clean up the barn every time after you milked, push anything that missed into the gutter, and then the gutter system had almost like a ladder or a conveyor that went outside and dumped into a manure spreader. So farmers were spreading manure all winter long. You wanted to get that manure spread before it froze up in the cold. When cattle weren't being milked, usually they went out into the barnyard for fresh air and exercise. And then at milking time, the farmer would call them, much the way I call my cattle when I bring them to a new pasture. That was the way it was when I was a kid. You'd hear it all around, and when I started raising cattle, I just adopted the same method. Beef cattle were always different in that you're not milking beef cattle, so if they get dirty, it's kind of okay. Typically, beef cattle were kept outside. Cattle don't really mind that much standing in the snow and in the cold because of the way their gut works. Rumination, fermentation, keeps them pretty warm. They don't get cold very easily. Nicer farmers, I guess, would have a three-sided shed for them to take shelter in. And typically cattle were fed outside. Now, in the days of square bales, you would feed at one end of the shed, but when round bales came along, people would put round bale feeders out in the barnyard, or as I call it, the winter pasture, and feed them out there. When we started farming, I thought about all these methods, and dairying has since moved to what's called a freestall method. Well, there were two real evolutions. First came milking in the parlor, bringing the cows into the parlor just for milking, which is a clean, sanitized environment. It helped keep bacteria out of the milk, and then bringing them in and out of that parlor just at milking time. The second thing that happened is they went to free stalls, where cattle they don't come into the barn to be milked, and you'll see these stalls that just have kind of low bars in between them. The cattle are in there, they can loaf in there, they can eat in there, and usually there's aisles behind the stalls to clean up, typically with a skid steer or something like that. So looking at all these methods, when we started, I kind of wanted to have a custom approach that fit what we were doing. And it had to do with regarding pasture as a crop, whereas in the old days, pasture was just kind of an exercise yard, and then you always supplemented with something off other fields. And secondly, using the composting process to build more fertility on our farm than just dropping raw manure on the ground, as was the fashion with dairy farms in the past, and to capture that manure. So what I decided to do was give the cattle a pretty good shelter, feed hay inside purposefully to keep the hay good quality. When you're running a small herd and you're feeding out of a round bale feeder out in the pasture, you get more waste than you do keeping the hay dry in here. And the other benefit is that as their bedding pack builds, I'm starting the composting process, and I'm holding that nutrient-rich material here and piling it and composting it further, so I have my own source of fertilizer for the fields. The other reason that we keep beef cattle in a winter pasture and in a barn in the winter and not out on the fields is because cattle have a tendency to run the same track. They know it's a safe place to step, so they make trails. You can even see that in our fields in the summer. And they tend to congregate in the same areas. They'll find places that are out of the wind or in the shade if it's sunny, and they'll congregate there. In a climate like ours with as many freeze-thaw cycles as we have, and I believe there's more than 100 of them here. I haven't looked lately. I used to know the number. that creates a long mud season. And a long mud season means where the cattle are congregating and trafficking, they're going to wipe out what's seeded in the pasture, or at least damage it greatly. So there's nothing to eat out on the pastures in the winter. We pull the cattle into the winter yard. There they can sunbathe on warm days and catch that sun. They get fresh air. They get exercise. The yard's big enough to do that. They come in here to eat. They can come in here when it's raining and snowing. And they have a dry place to lay if they should so decide to do so. Something like that. And the end result is, I think, happy cattle. And happy cattle gain well. And cattle that are gaining well make happy farmers. Little change up here. I'm grilling for lunch instead of dinner. The temperature today is hovering right around freezing. Snow's already starting to melt. These sirloins are about 1 inch thick, so I think that I'm just going to do direct heat for the whole cook. They're not that thick. Typically we have beef cut bone in, porterhouses, T-bones, sirloins. This was a 5-year-old cow, so I had New York strips, tenderloin, and boneless sirloin made just to see how they would be. 7 minutes, flip them. I guess that's a heavy sear. We'll see. The Maillard effect. Maillard reaction? I can't remember. It's going. Slush, steak, and chicken noises. This is the life. These are done. About 14 minutes total, 7 aside. How did we do? Looks good to me. Here comes the snowplow. Sirloin is always an awesome cut of meat, no matter the age of the animal, at least with Dexter's, in our experience. I'll see you after lunch. How'd you like the steaks?
They were really good.
They were good. Now we're fueled for the afternoon.
Patty.
Oh, woe and misery. Hey, Titus. Hey, bud. Your back is wet. You've been outside. All right, guys. You got to go outside. Yep, you got to go out. Come on, buddy. Let's go. Out you go. Let's go.
You too. Come on. You got to go.
He ain't buying it.
No, he's not. Come on.
Come on.
We're almost there.
Come on, Dolly.
She's like, no.
Come on, you gotta go outside. Just for a few minutes. Let's go. Alright. Cattle are always outraged.
I agree, but you're going to be happier when we're done.
out. Watch out, Dolly. You better move it. Go on in. Come on in, Norden. Titus. Of course, he has to brutalize everything. Does that make you feel better? They got the double bonus of new bedding and hay.
You can tell they're happy because it's quiet.
Yeah, that's right. If Patty's quiet, you know you've done something extraordinarily good for her. Oh. Titus will walk along and clear everybody out, and I think that she was getting pushed ahead of Titus, and that's why she came along. He'll stand crossways to the feeder so nobody else can get to it. Typical male.
Patty clears out the traffic jam.
Oh, that time it was Patty. She did the same maneuver, kind of. Hi, little one. Hi, Grumpy. Where there's a will, there's a way. The system we use for bedding the cattle is called a deep bedding pack. It's also an old system. It's kind of a modified deep bedding pack, but the real difference is we're not cleaning out the pen once a week or every few days. We let the bedding build up, layered with hay, and manure, of course, is in there as well, for a couple months. And then we clean it out, and it starts to heat up and provide some warmth for the cattle. It's a good way to get composting started. All you need is a carbon source, a nitrogen source, some water, and oxygen, and it gets going. There's all kinds of materials you can use for bedding. We use hay because it's on hand. It's the easiest thing for us to use. Probably this year I'll burn through all the rest of our old hay, and then next year we'll go to using probably wheat straw because the neighbors bale wheat straw. The problem with using straw around here is it's expensive. Used to be that a lot of farmers grew oats. They don't anymore. There's a modest crop of triticale and winter wheat grown around here that is the primary straw source. A lot of it goes for landscaping and to horse owners, and that drives the price up beyond hay. So hay is actually cheaper, even though it isn't quite as good as the bedding. There's plenty of other materials you can use. You can try to use sawdust, although I'm not sure how good of a deep pack it would make because it's not structural. You know, cows' hooves punch through it easily, so we don't use that. You can use dried corn stalks, like when dry corn is combined off a field. My feeling is probably that's more prevalent out in the Midwest where a lot of dry corn is harvested. That's, you know, off the cob and kernels into the combine. Around here, because dairy is the principal industry, it's corn silage, so it's chopped when it's green and the whole stalk and the cob is chopped up and made into silage. So there isn't really much of a source for corn stalks around here. Most of the farmers that do some dry corn prefer to chop up the stalks with a brush hog after they're done and then turn them into the soil. And it's kind of a source for organic matter in the soil. So how you bed, kind of depends on what's available, what's cheap, and what makes sense for you in your particular locale. They all can work. The snow stopped and it's a beautiful afternoon, really, considering. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I don't mention this very much, is we do have farm and channel merchandise, and we have a company out in Nebraska called Farm Focused, a family-owned company that does just a great job. High quality product, great service. Anyway, Black Friday's coming up here pretty soon. So for today only, this is the tail end of the sale. Unfortunately, it didn't align with my video schedule. We have 20% off all of the merchandise that we carry on the Farm Focused website. And I'll put in the top comment down below the code to get that 20% off and also a link for the merchandise. So if you're interested, you're welcome to go there and buy some merchandise. It does help us out. If you're not, that's fine too. I hope you have a great Sunday, and I'll see you next time.